So, welcome everyone. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, depending on where you're joining us from. I'm Jan Jeremias, um, one of your co-hosts today. And just a little bit about me. For over 20 years, I've combined my clinical research background and my passion for holistic wellness to support people and their pets toward health and longevity. Um, and so I do that through many different modalities. And so I'd love to have a conversation if anybody is interested in doing so. But one of my greatest joys and just heartfelt offerings are these conversations. And so I'm so honored to be here with Mary Jane, my co-host, collaborator, and friend. Thank you, Mary Jane, for being a part of this journey with me. And a huge thank you to all of you for being here today because these conversations happen because of you and your energy and what you bring to this Zoom circle here. And so, Mary Jane, do you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Jen. And yes, as Jen was mentioning, it really is an honor to be here with all of you because we really do feel that you're part of the amazing tapestry. There it is again that we're weaving together. And I am Mary Jane, or MJ, as I'm known in some circles, and I am the founder of my own creative studio where I help entrepreneurs to step into their light and share their gifts authentically. I help them to find their voice and co-create visuals with them that align with their mission. Because connecting with our true selves, we connect more deeply with others. And as I was mentioning, I'm honored to be here with Jan, as always. It's such a beautiful journey we're on together, and we are truly honored and blessed to be here with you today. So this morning, or today, I guess I should say, we wanted to share a poem with you. Just a little information on it. So in the 1980s, there was a folk singer named Mike Jones who wrote The Storyteller, which is a song inspired by the work of his friend Taffy Thomas. And The Storyteller is reproduced in this context as a poem, and its words perfectly encapsulate Taffy's own thoughts on the art and practice of storytelling. So it goes like this. I am a teller of tales, a spinner of yarns, a weaver of dreams, and a liar. I'll teach you some stories to tell your friends while sitting at home by the fire. You may not believe everything that I say, but there's one thing I'll tell you that's true. For my stories were given as presents to me, and now they are my gifts to you. My stories are as old as the mountains and rivers that flow through the land they were born in. They were told in the homes of peasants in rags and kings with fine clothes adorning. There's no need for silver or gold in great store, for a tale becomes richer with telling. And as long as each listener has a pair of good ears, it matters not where they are dwelling. A story well told can lift up your hearts and help you forget all your sorrows. It can give you the strength and the courage to stand and face all your troubles tomorrow. For there's wisdom and wit, beauty and charm. There's laughter, and sometimes there's tears. But when the story is over and the spell it is broken, you'll find that there's nothing to fear. My stories were learned in my grandparents' home, where their grandparents also had heard them. They were given as payment by traveling folk for a warm place to lay down their burdens. My stories are ageless, they never grow old. With each telling, they are born anew. And when my story is ended, I'll still be alive in the tales that I've given to you.
Welcome, Stephen and Amy, and thanks for sharing that beautiful poem or a song, Mary Jane. So, welcome everyone to Sacred Telling, the stories that bind us, where stories become medicine and community is born. We welcome you. We welcome the story you carry, the one etched in memory, the one held quietly in your heart, the one that's still shaping. We gather here because stories are not just words, they are medicine. They make they help us make sense of who we are, where we've been, and what we've survived. They carry the wisdom of our lived experience and remind us again and again that we are not alone. In a world that often asks us to be polished or silent, storytelling invites us to be real, honest, whole. Whether it's through spoken word, a meaningful object, or simply the willingness to be witnessed, storytelling heals. The studies show it regulates emotion, reduces stress, and even restores memory. But beyond science, stories humanize us. They connect the pieces, they stitch us to each other. This is a space where you do not have to have the right words. Your truth is enough because where one of us speaks from the heart, something in all of us softens. When we listen deeply, we begin to see ourselves reflected in one another. Together, we are weaving, the same word, we are weaving a community thread by thread, voice by voice, and story by story. We are honored to hold this space for you. Welcome, and we're so glad you're here.
It's so beautiful, isn't it, that we're here to be able to gather in a space where we can share our wisdom and share our stories together. Because there really is. I just love the whole concept of that there's healing in the power of storytelling. The fact that we by sharing our story, we can, in a sense, heal ourselves, but by sharing our stories we can also pass that healing on to others. So that perspective, just it's awesome to me.
Absolutely. And I think that, I never really had thought about it so much, but over the past like number of months where I've had the privilege um, to be able to share my story in a more formal way in a book um, with some beautiful, beautiful people, Seamus being one of them. And then also a wonderful talk that Amy actually gave for the Healthy Neighborhoods Project, which really kind of drove home this idea of storytelling and stories and the power that they hold. I think, it's something that we all experience, but I don't know that I had actually sort of sat down and realized the impact it has. And that was really kind of mind-boggling to me. That whole idea that we really are story makers. And that's our lived experience is this feeling that we are always, no matter what we're doing, we're always sharing stories. We go somewhere and we meet someone for the first time and we share something about ourselves, or we just, I was in Trader Joe's the other day and the guy says to me, "What's your favorite word?" And why? So I shared a story and the word. And so just that experience, that created this connection. And he's like, think about it some more. And when you come in next time, share it with me. And so just that connection in a world where I think that, people tend to feel so alone and divided, it's a way that allows us to unite and connect to each other.
I love it, Jen. I just love how your inspiration often comes to you in Trader Joe's.
I know it happens all the time. I mean, it's
I
like
think it's awesome.
I feel like I have this very strong connection to that store. I should share that with the guy that I get these very profound experiences in Trader Joe's. Yeah,
Well, it just goes to show you that you can find inspiration no matter where you land.
that's right. Exactly. Exactly. But that really beautiful, like just that story, and just being able to, you know, create a giggle or a laugh in someone else and shift where they are and have them reflect as a ripple afterwards is the impact of a story, which we've just demonstrated here. I mean, together we're creating and writing our own story right now.
Absolutely. And there is such importance in sharing the story. Because we never know where it's going to land because sometimes we don't know where people are at, what's happening in their lives, and sometimes there may be something that you can share in the story that's going to uh, help them along their way. At least that would be the goal anyways, but just from my own just sharing, I was telling Jan this when we were preparing for this story the other day. um well, a number of years ago now. I was in a well, let's just put it out there. I was married before, and had a very difficult relationship. And there was many things that happened that I won't necessarily go into here, but just to share vulnerably with you here. One of my nieces, approximately 2 years ago, was in a very similar situation. And I shared my story with her because when all these things were happening in my life, she was still under the age of 12. So she didn't really understand. She knew things were happening. She didn't really know exactly what was happening. But she was going through a very similar thing. And she was very thankful that I shared my story with her, um, because it gave her a reason to believe that there was a way to move forward and that she wasn't alone. And all of her fears and the different things that were coming to the surface in that situation, um, she didn't need to feel like she was alone. So it was just in that sharing of the story. She thanked me for sharing it because she just felt like she felt more energized, more empowered to move forward in the way that she already knew the answer herself. So I didn't give her the answer. I just helped her just hopefully recognize that there was a path forward and that she wasn't alone. Um, that even if people weren't necessarily saying it out loud, that there were people behind her supporting her and as she moved forward. So I share that just to say that there is power and healing that can come with sharing your story, especially if there's a time and a place for it. Um, I just felt intuitively that that was the time and the place to share that with her. And so it was a difficult thing to do because that's not a story I tell to very many people. A lot of people have no idea of my past relationship, especially since now I've been married 26 years, a second time. So it seems like so long ago, but yet those feelings, that energy, are so fresh, um, that I can share that with others and help them to realize they're not alone and can move forward in that. So thank you for listening and giving me space.
Oh, thank you, Mary Jane. And your story is truly powerful. I think that when we share our story, one is like, I think part of it is that sometimes we don't want to accept something and all of a sudden we have to own it. You know, I've talked about many times that I'm divorced, but I would say within the first year, those words could not exit my mouth. Like I couldn't say the word I was divorced. And I think because I didn't want to be labeled as the divorced person or the one who had, like in my family, I was the only one who's divorced, amongst other things. But that's a different story. Um, and um, and I had to say those words out loud, and I didn't want to be labeled as that. And I had a really beautiful conversation with a very close friend of mine whose sister died when he was 26 and she was 21. She died in a car accident. And I knew him for 10 years and never knew his sister had passed away. Like he never talked about it at all. And he said he didn't want to be labeled as the guy who had lost his sister. And so he never shared that part of himself. And then all of a sudden, like when I learned that about him, and then he realized, he said that all of a sudden he realized that he was an only, now he's an only child, like forever, you know, technically not, he doesn't feel that way, but technically he's an only child now. And he said he realized that if he didn't share stories about her, then it was as if she didn't exist in a way because it was a different relationship. Like, he said his parents are still living, and yes, it was their daughter, but he said that sibling relationship and so much of what they had shared you know, would not have been like shared at all. Like nobody would know that part of her. And it was the way he could keep her alive was through his stories. And so I think that that's what's so beautiful is that we heal ourselves when we share a story, but we also help others. And I think that was one of the best experiences with Seamus and our group from Simply Becoming is that whole thing that you shared, Mary Jane, about finding common threads, like all of a sudden, letting people know that they're not alone. And I think in our experience, like we realized the threads of all our stories and how they were so interwoven, even though we were from different parts of the world and different genders and different ages. Like that was insignificant because our stories were in some ways so similar.
That's so beautiful, Jan. Yes, I can relate to that. I had a difficult time saying those words as well, so I fully understand where you're coming from. Um,
I know
but it,
Seamus had his hand. Oh, sorry, Mary
I'm
Jane.
sorry. That's right, Seamus. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Please
no
proceed.
problem at all. Yeah, I mean, it's a lovely topic again, the poem, everything about today, even the silence we had, like for Justin, or excuse me, Austin, for having the courage to reach out and just at the top, just to authentically request just people to be there for him, be with him, and feel that energy from the whole group. I think it's a beautiful beginning to the session today. And again, the theme, like one of the words that jumped out in the poem was burden. And I've just written down kind of a couple of things here, like our story, we carried as a burden aspects of our own story. And again, that, is my own personal experience. And Jan wrote about, or I spoke about like the individual experiences we had in writing the book together and how it all kind of came together so effortlessly. But one of the things I think we all carried, each of the authors of our stories in that book, was a sense of burden um, that we carried through some belief or some aspect of our story, and typically related to our early life story of some experiences or things that happened or that we were told or whatever. And for me, it's become quite clear, like through a lifetime of work, I suppose, and through being open to challenging some of those beliefs is that you've talked about it here so beautifully as well, like MJ and Jan. It's about the liberation that comes with transforming that burden into a gift. And I mean that's it for me. It's that's a huge game changer for me through everything I've been doing. And
Seamus, you just muted yourself. I don't know if that was intentional.
I've got a very sensitive touchpad here, so sorry about that, guys. Yeah, it's the whole idea of shifting from what is a burden into actually using that as a mechanism, as one of the greatest gifts you can offer to yourself and to others, to share your story, to acknowledge your story, to use it as fuel rather than carry it as a burden. It becomes actually a huge source of energy and fuel for yourself. and in the sharing for other people. Like, and I think that's it. And again, the only other thing I suppose I would say, the other kind of key words that came up for me were around the whole idea of separation and aloneness. How when we share our story, we often feel that burden. We're the only one in the world carrying this burden. But when you realize, like, it's the Me Too effect, when you share, you engage and attract other people to kind of say and build that word connection you talked about in your engagement in the shop as well, John. Around how a simple invitation can translate into something into a powerful connection, like with another person. From the simplest sharing, you can open up such a channel of engagement and hope and of nurturing your true beauty, like from your inside out, something you would have carried as a burden that you can actually begin to actually harness as fuel and say, oh my God, yeah, this, do you know what? I've never acknowledged that story. And now when I realize the power of acknowledgement and owning it, I experience this sense of liberation and connection, which actually translates the whole idea of burden and disconnection into something that's just amazing, I suppose. So yeah, thanks so much, Jan, for all these conversations we had every week as well. That's another part of the whole experience, I suppose.
Oh, you're so welcome, Seamus. And really, like I said, these conversations are because of all of you. Um, yeah, so much of what you shared, Seamus, resonated, and I was thinking about this whole idea of, that absolute feeling of aloneness. Like you're the only one in the world who's going through something. And cognitively, I think we know that's not true. Like, but I think it's very hard for us as we go and navigate the world and we like go about, in our daily activities and we think to ourselves, gosh, I feel so alone. And I think we crave or we long for someone to share it with. And it takes a lot of courage to share your story, just like it took a lot of courage when we opened to like for Austin to, ask for us all to send that energy. I mean, I think it takes a lot of courage for us to, be that vulnerable and to reveal things about ourselves, which we kind of want to keep behind closed doors, because we're afraid of what people might think or what people might, all that kind of stuff that we kind of ponder and reflect on, like, oh my gosh, if they only knew, quote unquotes. And then all of a sudden, when we put down that and we become more human and we become just more vulnerable and more real, we leave it such a door open. Stephen, please.
Well, what a beautiful conversation. In the work that I do in the Ericksonian style, storytelling is the pivotal point of transformation. It's what allows the information to come in. And I've given a lot of thought to this because I see in the human experience we have wounding and we have trauma and it is real. And so my engineering mind tries to put together this process or the meaning behind it because I've always strived to try to understand why do bad things happen. And even though we can't understand that, we can see this arc of healing and expression. And I think the first thing that happens, the most important pivotal moment is feeling it. Because when something bad happens, I think you first have to feel it to heal it. And it's that raw experience, the pain. Sometimes there's confusion, trauma, loss. And then at that point, just getting out of bed may be a big deal. It may be a win. And sometimes that initial traumas, sometimes it's held in silence, sometimes it's held in shame. And I think that key internal shift is this happened and it matters, right? And I think then we start gaining a little bit of strength and the next thing is naming it, right? Acknowledging it and giving it a little bit of voice. And I think the shift there is that this is part of my story, but not the whole of who I am. I am not the pain that I carry. And then I think the third part is if we can begin to write it, to journal about it, to make meaning and integrate it, then that shift becomes the story doesn't break me, it makes me. And then I think we go into this deeper arc of meaning, which is then you can start speaking about it with purpose, right? You can now share it with others, not to we're speaking not to heal, but to actually help. And in helping, we actually heal as well. And then we can write it with intention. This is when we start writing books and things like that. And so now the story's a service. And so this teaching, it's a form of embodied wisdom, and we can't teach what we don't know. And so by moving beyond, we actually realize that we can leave it behind. We can find peace. We can find simplicity. We can find freedom from the narrative itself. And so, what I'm trying to share is that we go through the fire. We gather our ashes, and then I do believe that we weave them into wings, and we offer others this map. It's the form that the ego, this fragile human experience, this wounding experience, is the chrysalis that gives us the wings to transform into something greater. So thank you for letting me share that.
Wow, that was very profound, Stephen. I loved the phrase that you said where we gather our ashes and we weave them into wings. What a beautiful visual that is. I love it. Thank you for sharing that wisdom.
Absolutely. I don't usually go back and necessarily listen to our recordings of the shows that we do and we put on YouTube. But now I'm like kind of compelled. I'm like, I didn't write it fast enough, Stephen. So go back and write down some of the key phrases you said so I can like recall them because they were so beautiful.
Well, let me share that the words are not as important as the concept, and that concept is that there is purpose to the pain that we experience, and it becomes something quite beautiful. So, however that manifests within each one of us, I think that's the most important thing.
Absolutely. I remember many years ago um and that was, a personal experience where I thought to myself it was so like life was so traumatic at that time and I thought to myself there has to be a greater purpose that I'm going through this. There must be something I'm supposed to learn, something I'm supposed to gain from this situation. Somehow I'm supposed to make a change, whatever it was. And it was like a grouping of things that all happened in my life at one time, and so it was like three major things that were all happening simultaneously. And so it was like there was no reprieve. Like I didn't have one aspect of my life that didn't feel an upheaval at the time. And I remember thinking to myself, there has to be a reason. Like there has to be something that's supposed to happen and transform because I was literally in the ashes kind of thing. And I was like, something's and then something shifted, and so and sometimes, it's leaving certain things behind, certain people, certain aspects, we need to, you know, sometimes like you have to end something sometimes, to begin something new, and that's hard. We don't necessarily want things to end un that fear of like that unfamiliarity of like you don't know what's next or if this is gone, even though it might not be, even though it might be horrible, whatever you're in, you know what it is. And that step out of it can be so freaking scary.
Yeah, it's definitely a brave step for sure. Yeah, there's a phrase about there's comfort in the discomfort.
That's right.
So sometimes that's what holds us back because it's what we know.
Hmm.
But wow, when we start getting out of our head and start listening to our heart and start taking those steps forward and just trusting, taking a leap of faith, moving forward, and wow, the beauty of that story as it unfolds um, can be just amazing.
And also in finding a group of people that support you. I
Absolutely.
think that, along to move forward because I think that we need those people that, let's say, are in like what we frame as are in our corner.
Hmm.
Um, you know, and I think, what I think of when I think about it, I think about it almost in this garden, like I've like gathered people into my life and that, who I consider my tribe or my people who I feel, even though they may not know it sometimes, they are really a true support. Many of you are here. And so I think that that's really what we need also is we need to just know that basically, somebody's got my back.
Absolutely.
Al, please.
Yeah, I've got two acronyms right here. So the
Yay.
word bind, bind, it's a bind. It's like believing in nurturing death. So when it comes to storytelling, it's important that we dwell into that. And the word sacred, sacred is the stillness. When we're creating our stories, we have the stillness in us and the attentiveness for the A, which makes it consistent. We have consistency in our storytelling and we do not deviate from what we are telling. And it's more than revealing and also transparency. So it's the R for revealing. So there's the story in us that we can bring out our authenticity and the effectiveness for the E, and which makes it a good deliverability. So it's the D for the last deliverability of our storytelling that makes it so impactful for us on daily lives. So these are the two acronyms that I'm bringing. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. As always, Al, write them down in the chat so we can see them right now. Thank you so much for always sharing those wonderful acronyms. And so we have a line of people here. So Zara first.
Thank you, Jan. And thank you, Mary Jane, for holding this session. Storytelling is one of the things I do, what I love doing, and I love acting the characters out. And what I wasn't aware of, and this is something I don't know if I'm raising awareness or if I'm repeating myself, but one of the things I discovered the very hard way was I had to be really careful who I shared those stories with, especially the first time. Now, can anybody guess why I'm saying this? Yes? No? Okay.
Perhaps.
So, pardon, say that again, Mary Jane.
Perhaps we might know, but please
Okay. Do
proceed.
you want to hazard a guess? Do you want to hazard a guess? Because I'd love to know, like, yeah, what everyone's thoughts on that is. Like, how selective are we being about who we're sharing that with?
I agree with you about especially if the story is extremely vulnerable to ourselves. Yes, I definitely understand the cautiousness of that for sure. It's just for me, I've just learned I'm sure you have too, just learned to listen to my heart as to when is a good time and once it's safe to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I guess I wasn't aware of.
Can I just make a comment on that for a second, Zara?
Yeah, sure, sure, Jan.
Yeah.
Go.
I just wanted to say the other thing is the person you're sharing the story with ready to hear it?
Yeah.
And that's what I've had to consider as I navigate, because sometimes the person who you want to share that story with is not in the right place to hear what you have to say.
Mm-hmm.
And, so the whole idea, is it the right time?
Yeah.
That's another aspect.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jan, and thank you, Mary Jane, for those contributions. So yeah, is it the right time? The right place even. Are the other people in the audience, can they handle it? Are we asking their permission even? But that's kind of thinking about the others. Okay. Then there was the other aspect I hadn't considered. And this is because I like to think the best in people most of the time, is that I wasn't aware that some people were wanting to hear that story only to use it against me later. And I fell for that big time, right? Now, this is a story within itself. So, how do we identify those kind of people? Kind of became my wife for a while. I was like, I need to know. Like, I'm not going to meet another person like that. They're not going to manipulate it. They're not going to use it and torture me later on. Because what I discovered was one of the ways, to handle PTSD, like you say, the story aspects, the storytelling aspect, sharing it with people who receive it well. Because what happens is that story leaves our brain because we have a feeling associated with that event, and it leaves our brain and it kind of gets mixed up, if you like, in an ocean of the feeling with the other people that we're sharing it with, and then it goes back into our brain softer. Okay, so the more we tell that story to kind of people who can receive it well, the softer that feeling becomes, right? It's almost like that trigger becomes, it's not going to attack you next time and hijack you so easily. And so what happens if you share it with the wrong person who's going to use this against you later, who starts torturing you? So, you're not going to want to tell that story again. You're going to think something's wrong. Yeah. So one of the things I love to help people is how to identify those kind of people. So how do we do that? Do I have permission to share that with you guys, or have I used up my time now? Mary Jane, Jan?
I, I say go ahead, please share.
Okay. So one of the things that I'm watching out for is one, they refuse to answer questions. Like they'll put it off, they'll make excuses, right? They'll be, oh, later, or, oh, I don't know, or, literally they'll just change the subject even. And what else I also notice is they don't tend to ask questions. They're just listening and listening and listening and just trying to find what else they can catch you out with. And there's like storing it almost. And then I also noticed that they're the kind of people who tell on others, who are always making statements on others, who are always blaming others. So it's almost like, okay, if they've done that about their own mother or their own whatever, who was really, really close to them, and they called them a friend. Okay, I'm not talking about someone who's abused you. I'm talking about someone who, you're calling a friend and then you're snitching on them behind their back and causing problems for them. So yeah, making statements on others is another thing. So they're not making I statements. They're not sharing about themselves. They're going, he did that, she did that, he felt like that, he said that. And it's like watching out for those kind of things. And that's really helped me identify who I want to hang around with. So thank you very much for sharing and letting me share. Thanks.
Thank you, Zara, for sharing that with us. Um, Very much appreciated. And so, Amy, please.
I love this discussion. This is so enriching for me, and it's my favorite topic. But I wanted to share how I wanted to go back to what Seamus was talking about, like the burden of our stories, how we carry those with us. And I guess I missed the poem in the beginning, but I was just thinking about how, stories, they do have the power to heal, not only because they give us the lessons and they show us who's in our community, but they give us the answers. Because sometimes we forget that a story, when the story is happening, that's really a snapshot in time. It's like a video that someone takes. But it's not until after we have the recording file that we can actually zoom in and take another look at it. So in other words, like when we are telling our story, we have the ability to zoom out to see like what else happened during that time. And I say that because, it's a different take than what people say in the mainstream, which is don't listen to your old stories. And I'm not saying don't listen to your old stories. What I am saying is that, um, when so it's very easy to dismiss our stories. When we hear that, it's like, oh, don't listen to our old stories. We can dismiss what happened. We can dismiss the past. We could just move on from here. But if there's an answer, if there's a lesson that you did not receive quite yet, you're going to have to need to zoom out and look back in time. Um, and what Seamus was saying is like acknowledge the story. We have to acknowledge the story before we can move on from it. We can't just dismiss it outright. Um, and so when it comes to zooming out in our story, sometimes like something terrible happened, something like bad happened, something negative happened. Um, but then like when we find the positive in it, sometimes the positive happens because of timing, because it's kind of like when Mary Jane was talking about her how her marriage she had a rocky first marriage, and that had she told the story right after that first marriage, all she could probably see was the negative. But um I would like to say that when she told her story to her niece, that actually was a part of that story. The story had to continue in order to find the real lesson in all this. Yes, it was a lesson for Mary Jane's niece, but it was a lesson for Mary Jane to show her that she was actually healed from all of this. And so that's what I mean by zooming out, that sometimes like we look at a story and we have to like mentally zoom out. And then sometimes the story is still going on and we don't actually realize it until days, weeks, months, years later. And so that's when we zoom out. That's when we find those lessons and those answers and that community. So thank you for letting me share my piece.
Thank you, Amy. Really, I love that idea. It was almost like the story continued far beyond the original happening. And so when Mary Jane shared it, she was sharing a more complete story as opposed to one single part, which was the traumatic event or that whole little, whatever the situation was. And that happens for us all because as we process, the story becomes more complete because we do include the aspects of ourselves that we're able to move forward, and in sharing our story, maybe we further expand upon that processing. And so the story becomes even larger than it was in a good way, um, creating a more of an impact for yourself, but then also for others. And so I love that. Thank you so much, Amy. I know Austin had his hand up. Austin, did you want to share something?
I was going to, this conversation is very inspiring and nurturing. Really glad that I showed up despite any perceived stories. And I was going to share a little bit, but I think I'm going to pass for now. But I did want to acknowledge that it was a great turnout, as many people showed up, and I'm really loving everyone's contribution to this shared story.
Thank you, Austin. Um, Stephen, please.
Just very briefly, one of the biggest transitions that happens in our mind when we go from healing is that we realize that not everyone is kind. And what was being shared about this idea that there are people that will try to find fault with us, that will use our stories against us. What I found is they will find fault, or they will make up stories if they don't have one to use. And so there's nothing we can do that will make them happy or make ourselves good enough for them. They will constantly find fault. They'll constantly demean or talk behind our backs, and that's them. And here's the biggest transformation is, one, letting that go and realizing they will do that no matter what. And the goal in life is to find the people that are more interested in you and less interested in drama, less interested in fault or negative. And when we do that, and when we make space for those that create drama, there's a sense of peace. And I think the biggest shift that we have to make is start becoming aware of our own unkindness to ourselves, the stories we tell ourselves, the self-critical nature, right? How we hold ourselves back. And if we can grow beyond that, it opens up a chance for strength. And I would encourage Austin to share what came to mind, because we don't have to do it perfectly. There was a time when I couldn't even speak on stage because I was so afraid. So, Please, if you have anything that is left unsaid, please say it.
All right. Uh, Gosh. So starting off in this conversation, I really loved the different awareness in areas of how are we looking at the perception of story, you know, because when I think it was Seamus who brought up about burdens and kind of navigating around that and how does that relate to these different perspectives we're holding on story, I really started to tie in a lot of things and how it related to my own life. So for story, for sake of this share that I'm sharing now, uh, for me, um, if I were to pick an origin point, say of my own liberation, stepping into my power, so to speak, early last year, 2024, my challenge was evaluating the story on all levels. So not just the story told to me, the programming and conditioning, the story that then I am sharing with others, and the story I was telling myself. You see, my burden at the time was an accumulation of all three of those, if not more. So outside, inside, and then also maybe how I might have been neglecting or holding myself back. And although I didn't know it for 29 years, it was heavily interwoven with mental health. So not everyone knows, but on paper, I have six diagnosed DSM-5 classified disorders. And I've been in and out and through all kinds of different mental health experiences, knowledge, family base, all kinds of things. And when I did start this origin of, okay, what kind of story am I telling myself? When I stepped into that space of, um, okay, yeah, I see this story as a burden. And yeah, I'm not tying it as well as everyone else contributed little nuggets that kept adding to this breakdown that was forming in my head. But at the origin, I actually started, say I guess, a business venture with a branding of burdens into blessings. And this was all centered around exactly what we're talking about here, which is like this story. And the motivation of the burdens into blessings was me sharing how aside from reality or perspective or opinion or judgment, the burden that I perceived or the story that I told myself that my mental health and all the things I was struggling with and no one was understanding, I was alone, all the things. I found a way to start telling my own story to myself in a new way. And I found how to look at those as blessings. And literally, there was so much more involved in this, but that was the starting point of shifting my own story and then being able to help other people with that story because I changed my own story. And so that's where the burdens and the blessings um, branding came from early on. It was all about indigo empowerment, showing people that their story is so much more powerful than what someone tells them that is, what they tell themselves are. And like we brought up today in today's discussion, how we then pay that forward. So I just felt really inspired to um, just conceptualize all that in my mind. You know, I'm not a person that believes in coincidence, so I just am grateful. I'm grateful that I tuned in, that I'm here, I showed up, and that I did see those. I told the story of the blessings instead of anchoring in a story of burdens. So I'm complete.
Thank you, Austin, for honoring us with your story and for feeling that this was a space you could do that. And we honor you, and your story speaks volumes as to the person you are and the value you bring to the world. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Absolutely. So beautiful. And I think so much of what you shared, the power is that we all here could relate to that story. I think we've all felt that kind of, maybe not the specifics, but we've all had circumstances in our lives which have echoed that in some way. And caused us to, it really led to us reframing something that happened and looking so that it wasn't a burden or it wasn't a trauma, or it was that trauma, but we moved through it and what we learned from it and gained from it. And I think one of the things that many people have shared today was this whole idea that we were not only that specific event, like we're not that only that specific aspect of the story. Each one of us is so much more than that one thing. Zara, please.
Thank you, Jan. So, yeah, going back to that, thank you. Thank you, Austin, for sharing what was on your mind. And I guess that's credit to both Jan and Mary Jane for creating a space and everybody sort of going, yeah, go ahead. And also Stephen, thank you for encouraging Austin to go ahead. So the kind of stories I like to share is one that has ended with a like a positive conclusion. So like it's like this tri-summit story where we have a problem, then there's a journey, and then there's an answer at the end of it. And so when I get to the end of that, I like to call it a chapter almost of that particular issue or whatever it was I was fighting with. And I know that I've tested it and it actually works. That's when I then share the story. So I'll act it out. I'll let people feel what I was feeling, but I'm over that initial horrible feeling, if that makes sense. So people will sit and go, "Oh my God, like Zora, how the hell did you get through that? Like, I don't know, I'd probably kill myself if I were you." Like I get that kind of a reaction. And then I go, okay, well, that was a journey. And then like this is what I've learned and this is how I do it now. And like, it might be slightly different for you, and then I then help them understand their own uniqueness. And so, how they go about it will be slightly different to how I would go about it. So we all have a different background, we have a different experience, we have a different cultural understanding of certain situations. How we handle stress is different. We're designed different, even though we're human beings. But it's understanding and celebrating those differences and going, okay, just because she did it this way doesn't mean I have to do it this way, but that is a path. So it's almost like showing the way forward, that we don't have to forever. One of the things I often talk about is generational trauma, that we don't have to accept it and carry it forward and say, oh, that's in my DNA. Yeah. Like, how can we move forward and make sure that we don't leave that same footprint behind in the next generation? That's what I'm really passionate about. And so every time, that Trey Summit story's ended, that's when I'm ready to tell that story. Right now, I'm going through another really, really big transition. Now it's related to real estate. So it's almost coming to a massive conclusion that is possibly the end of that chapter. And yeah, I don't know what's going to happen next. So I'm not going to be ready to tell that story because, I don't want people to feel sorry for me. That's not going to help me and it's not going to help them. I'm not looking for sympathy, if that makes sense. I'm looking to help others with my story. So that's how I go about it.
Thank you, Zara. I think that you bring up a really great point, but I mean, personally, I think sometimes sharing our story when we're in the process helps us sort of digest what is happening and helps us to formulate how we feel. If somebody witnesses our story, um, and holds space for our story, because otherwise we're kind of telling it to ourselves and we have a very one size sort of like wearing a particular type of glasses kind of outlook on something. And we need someone else's perspective because we get very narrow and trapped in a way of thinking. And I think sometimes sharing a story when we're in the process of something is a really powerful way to heal. Amy.
So I think that sometimes there are moments when we are telling a story to heal ourselves, and there are times when we're telling a story to help heal others, which is like from the teaching position. And what Zara was saying, it's you know, um, when I tell a story of something vulnerable from my past, it's not so much I want sympathy. It's more about, hey, like this is what's happening, or like as in like telling people like this is what's up, or it's like I'm trying to teach um from a certain standpoint. And I think that when we are in in that space of um wanting to move on from a moment of our lives, or we are teaching others through our story, I think at that point, it's about, what is the intention behind telling the story in the first place to that particular audience. I know that sounds very marketing, but I kind of apply it here too, because it's like, if I'm around people who I know are gonna hear a vulnerable story and they're gonna either rebuff it, or they're going to automatically like just feel sorry for me. It's more like I have to be more, I had to kind of think ahead. I had to be more intentional about like, why am I telling this story to them? And from that point, it actually tends to change how they perceive me and the story once I like kind of take that like moment before I actually open my mouth to be like, all right, like my intention to tell this story is to tell people, hey, this is what's up. And this is my call to action. This is what I need going forward, or this is what you all need to kind of think about going forward. Um, it just changes the position of the storyteller. So, I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. I think that we bring up another really great point, Amy, is like what are our intentions behind sharing that story, which is a huge question. Like, why are we telling it and where is it coming from within us? And that's something really, I think, really powerful for us to reflect upon. Like when we go out and we share that story, what are we trying to like, what is the purpose of it for the other person, but what's the purpose of it for us?
I think what you said about purpose, that was the big thing that I just kind of felt just now. Like it's not like not necessarily like what is the outcome, like what is the purpose? Because we're always trying to find purpose in everything that we do. And I think that yeah, I think that purpose is like the big word. For some reason, energetically, it feels like purpose has a bigger, higher vibration than say intention or outcome. And so I love that you brought that word into this conversation, Jan, because we're always looking for a purpose, and it's like purpose that helps to drive the story also. So I think like purpose is just kind of integrated in everything that we do with storytelling.
Mm, thank you, thank you, Amy.
Just briefly comment on
Thank
that as
you.
well, Jan, because I think attention and intention are tied together. Like this is something I only kind of realized recently through Otto Scharmer as well. He wrote a lovely book called Presencing, and he kind of linked beautifully the idea of attention and attunement into what's going on within ourselves to be ready to for the magic to emerge. And I think that comes back to intention. Like, and I think it ties directly actually to that question, Amy. For me, when you were sharing that, it's around, it's not going in with the pre-prepared script. We just know when we're paying attention, literally from our inside out, around what feels right in the moment. Now is the moment for me to share my story, or now is the moment to not share my story, or whatever. So I think we're so attuned and attending to what's going on that we operate from that place of authentic intention when we're operating from that foundation, from that space, I guess. And I think that's the magic of being attuned and being ready to engage in a way that you're not prepared. You're actually engaging in the heat of the moment, like whether it's whatever is happening, and you're attuned. You're ready to operate from that sense of authentic intention rather than having a pre-prepared script to go in and sell and share and force. This is the complete opposite, I think, of what you're describing there. When you're attuned, you're allowing to emerge what is going to emerge, and it's going to be the right thing because it's coming from that place of authentic intention, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I think what I'm hearing here is actually like the same thing. It's just that we're talking about two different sides of discernment. Um, because like, because I think that when you're telling that story, you are you are coming from that authentic place. But I also think that um, I think that when we are in that moment and we're in a discussion, we're coming from that place, we're channeling that, but we're also observing people um, before we open our mouths too. So it's not a script per se, but it's more like, oh, I'm noticing all these things and I'm feeling that the vibe is this right now. Um, what are people ready to hear right now? And then yeah, I think like it's it's about different levels of discernment, but also it's about different levels of being in tune too. So no, I agree with everything that you're saying, Seamus. But I think that like it's just what tool do you take out of your toolbox?
I love that, Amy. I'm a big thing of like, what tool do you take out? I think it's a really great visual. Zara?
Yeah, thank you. And I think Amy and Seamus both wrapped up kind of like what I was saying and explaining it from a different kind of angle. So thank you guys for helping me out there. So I think we have two categories, if I've understood correct, is sometimes we share the story in order to heal. And, again, that then depends on like, can the audience receive us? Or like, do we have their permission? Or are we talking to the right people? Are they supportive? Because I think that's what we need in that space. And then there's other times when we'll share the story, and we've already healed from it. So, like, yeah, we are going to get naysayers and people who are going to be jealous and, they're going to be like rubbishing us. And especially if you're standing on stage and say you're really popular at this point, there's always going to be somebody who's not going to like us. Like, we can't please everybody. And when we are standing in our power at that point, like we've accepted that we're going to get that. So we've already like rehearsed how we're going to handle that. So it's standing in a different position when we're telling that story. Like when you're on top of that mountain or where you've overcome that challenge, knowing that, yeah, you might get 2 or 3% of the people rubbishing you, but you're helping 98%. And I think that's the risk we're then taking. However, when we're in that kind of vulnerable state, and if we're not careful, and we meet those kind of people who are just like, oh, they're listening to you and tuning in, I think that's kind of like a risk factor that, yeah, I'd like to leave you guys, with that, and I'm sure you guys could play the replay. Um, and yeah, it's just lessons learned really over the 5 years because I shared lots of stories and I hadn't healed through all of them yet, so that was a moving forward how I decided to play it, and that seemed to work for me, I'd say, over the last 3 years.
Thank you, Zara. Yeah, and I think that you sometimes like, I think we all do this. We're human beings, and sometimes we share and we think to ourselves, like, oh my gosh, this might not have been the right group, so sometimes it's a little like, trial and error where we're like going and we think, we misread whatever's happening for some reason. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh my gosh, I probably shouldn't have shared that.
Well,
And
posting, I was
like,
posting to LinkedIn, Jan, so I didn't know who was reading it. That's the thing. I was just
right.
posting it to LinkedIn. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm talking about like if you're in a group, I wasn't referring to LinkedIn, but it could be like, let's say written, sharing of stories. I was thinking of like literally conversations and then thinking to yourself, okay, maybe I misread this and I shouldn't have shared this at this moment. Or maybe it's writing and you think to yourself, like, am I ready? Like you said, I mean, it's one thing, when the book came out, all of a sudden there was this very real moment of like, like I'll be frank, I was like, oh shit, people are going to read this. It was like, oh my gosh, what did I do kind of thing, and then get over it. But like there's this immediate reaction of like you write it and you write it for the group and everybody reads it and it's wonderful and everything. And then all of a sudden it's out there and you can't take it back. Like that's not like you can put it in like it's not like you can put it in a box afterwards and say, okay, that was a mistake. It doesn't happen. And so was that real moment. I think that happens too, to be totally transparent.
Absolutely. Now, thank God my old account went. I lost about 3,000 posts. So all whatever story I told is in some kind of dust cloud. So I don't have to worry about it anymore. So yeah, silver linings, you know.
Absolutely. Mary Jane, did you want to share something? Or
I
did
just wanted to say, I just wanted to speak to and was what Amy had shared earlier. I mean, and therein lies the power of the story, because sometimes the story isn't quite complete yet, and we need to, look back on those things, and it becomes part of the story. So it's just like a story within the story. So, there's always the flip side to those things where, where it becomes part of the nuance of the story as well. So, what a beautiful conversation today.
Absolutely. So we're going to move into a few moments of meditation and a surprise. So take a moment after this beautiful conversation just to arrive into your body, into your space once again. Find a comfortable seat or position, allowing your body to settle in a way that feels supportive and at ease. Gently let your eyes close if that feels comfortable, or lower your gaze if that feels better for you today. Begin to bring awareness to your breath, not changing it, just noticing it. The breath moving in and the breath moving out. Let yourself be held here by this breath, this moment, this space. With each inhale, feel yourself arriving a little bit more fully. With each exhale, let go of the outside world just for now. The to-do lists, the roles you play, the expectations, breathe them out. You are here and you are enough. Feel the ground beneath you. Let it remind you that you are supported and that you belong. Now bring your awareness to the quiet space within you where emotions live, where memories linger, where your truest voice waits. You may begin to notice a sense of warmth or openness there, perhaps stillness, or perhaps a little hesitation. Allow yourself to rest in this place. This is the place where stories live. You don't need to know the words. You don't have to plan what you'll say. Your story already knows its way. The stories we carry are not mistakes. They are maps. They are bridges. They are threads that connect us to one another and to something larger than ourselves. As you breathe, invite compassion into this space for your story, for your silence, for your becoming. Now bring into your awareness the others who are gathered here, each person carrying a story just like you, each one with a path, each one human. In this space, we do not fix, we witness, we honor, we hold. And so let's hold each other now in presence, with breath, with care, and with quiet understanding. Take one more full inhale and a slow, gentle exhale. And as you begin to return to the shared space, know this: all that you are is welcome here. Your voice is sacred. Your story matters. Feel free to keep your eyes closed for the next few moments as we begin once again together.
sitting in the stillness, just me and my thoughts again, tracing all the silent stories woven deep beneath my skin. Every thread a choice I made, or one I let slip by. Some laid out with purpose, some like lightning in the sky. And the moon keeps turning even when I lose control. 'Cause life is a tapestry, warp and weft in harmony. The tangled parts, the broken seams, they hold the richest dreams. It's not about a flawless line, it's in the weave, the fight, the climb. So don't you hide your threads of gold. You're beautifully tangled, beautifully whole. There were days I nearly gave up, when the knots just wouldn't break, pulling at the pieces, hoping I was not a fake. But even in the chaos, there's a truth that never fades, a rhythm in the background that somehow finds its way. And when I step back slowly, I see what time has sown. 'Cause life is a tapestry, warp and weft in harmony. The tangled parts, the broken seams, they hold the richest dreams. It's not about a flawless line, it's in the weave, the fight, the climb. So don't you hide your threads of gold. You're beautifully tangled, beautifully whole. Then you came in like a whisper, saw the truth I tried to hide, not just the polished pattern, but the chaos wrapped inside. And you didn't try to change it, you just helped me see the light. That every stitch I've struggled through was always part of right. Yeah, life is a tapestry, woven through with you and me. Love and loss and bravery, in every thread we see. No perfect edge, no flawless line, but something deeper by design. And I won't hide my threads of gold. I'm beautifully tangled, beautifully whole. Just me and the stillness, and this heart that knows I'm beautifully tangled, beautifully whole.
Thank you for letting us share that beautiful piece of music. Um, our beautiful friend Mike Williams, of course, helped create that using Jan's beautiful words of poetry that she wrote for us after the last session about the tapestry we weave. But so true, telling the story, and you know, so tangled but beautifully whole. Beautiful words. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Jane. And thank you all. Um, yeah, I was inspired after our last conversation. And so I shared that with Mike, and Mike created that beautiful song for us. with those words. So, boy, what a morning or an afternoon or evening. But we're so glad that you joined us today. Please take a moment to, you know, maybe reflect on this weekend. We'd love to hear from you. If you are so inclined, you can go back to our YouTube channel and you can listen or share it if you feel this conversation would benefit somebody else. Please feel free to share that along the way. We will be here. Oh, actually, we will not be here next Friday. We will be off next Friday. And so we'll be back in 2 weeks from today.
Yes, but we hope that you'll join us then. And yes, please feel free to connect with us during that time. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you for being here and being the blessings that you are in creating this beautiful community. So thank you.
Thank you. These conversations and this only happens because of all of you. Lots of love, everybody.